please welcome Senior Advisor to the President and Infrastructure Implementation Coordinator, Mitch J. Landrieu.
Good morning. Oh my God, sound like my mother, Mitch J. Landrieu. That's when you know you're in trouble. It's nice to see everybody. Thank you all so much for joining us today. We're gathered here today to talk about how we can build faster, build stronger, build better, and deliver unprecedented results from the opportunity that the once-in-a-generation bipartisan infrastructure law has given us. And we're joined today by cabinet secretaries, governors, mayors, engineers, and researchers, labor and industry leaders who are all going to play a part in our mission to accelerate infrastructure building in America. For decades, American presidents have promised to invest in infrastructure, but they did not deliver. After years of dead ends and broken promises, President Biden brought Republicans and Democrats together to actually get it done. The largest investment in infrastructure since the 1950s and 60s. Now, we've got to put that money to work. So today, as we speak, our bipartisan infrastructure law is making never-before-seen investments in America's competitiveness that will create good-paying union jobs, grow our economy, invest in our communities, combat climate change, and help lower costs for all families. We're talking about better roads, better bridges, airports, ports, clean air and safe water, and yep, faster internet. The bipartisan infrastructure law is also providing the first down payment towards achieving our administration's climate agenda by building a better electric grid, investing in resilience, expanding clean transportation, and cleaning up legacy pollution. I'm proud of our work so far. We have all hit the ground running. To date, about $180 billion announced. We're talking over 5,000 projects, big and small, in all 50 states, D.C., and the territories. Still, we cannot squander the opportunity before us. We must seize it. We must accelerate the pace by which the federal, state, and local governments and the private sector deliver infrastructure projects to fully maximize the benefits of the law. Today, we will showcase how we have engaged in a whole-of-government effort in partnership with business and labor, states and local governments, and civic leaders to build our infrastructure to a higher standard of on time, on task, and on budget. As we approach the one-year milestone of the bipartisan infrastructure law, this is only the beginning. Federal agencies will do their part, and we are focused as never before on accelerating the pace of design, construction, and permitting. But with over 90% of the infrastructure law funding being delivered by non-federal agencies, that is our states, our tribal, regional, territorial, local, and industry partners, they must find ways to accelerate delivering infrastructure as well. Fixing our aging bridges, repairing our crumbling water systems, transitioning to a clean energy future, it all depends on us getting it right. So together, we must deliver better, faster results. This is a one-team, one-fight mission to get it done for you and for America. In our first 11 months, we have run to the fire. We find a problem, we fix a problem, I like to say. We know too many communities lack information about how to access funds, so we developed a guidebook and a technical assistance guide to help communities build the tools and planning and capacity building they need to take advantage of the infrastructure law. We know that workforce needs are real. Not having a trained workforce can grind this entire operation to a halt. That's why we launched the Infrastructure Talent Pipeline Challenge to help industry, labor, community college, workforce boards, and local governments create new partnerships in construction, broadband, and electrification. We know that permitting is another area where we can do better, so we developed an action plan focused on early cross-agency coordination, establishing clear timeline goals, tracking key projects information, and engaging in early, meaningful outreach communication with communities, among other priorities. Now, the Inflation Reduction Act added $1 billion that will boost the agency's ability to speed up important environmental reviews and community engagement. And we're continuing to push for new permitting reforms like the one Senator Manchin has laid out for us all. This is not just about the what, it's not just about the who, but it's about the way we are building a better America together. To build on our aggressive efforts to date, today we are releasing the Biden-Harris Action Plan to accelerate infrastructure, which includes new commitments from federal agencies as well as new actions from our partners here today. Our motto is simple: on task, on time, and on budget. We can and we must find a way or make one. The status quo is not acceptable. Decades-long project timelines will not get us there. For the first time in generations, we have the money. We must now have the will to make a new way to better, faster, cheaper project delivery. We have to cut red tape, break down silos, find ways to work smarter across the government and the private sector. We're going to prove that we can do big things. This has to be the moment when we finally try to fix our workforce development challenges. This has to be the moment that we ensure every American is connected to high-speed internet, closing the digital divide once and for all. This has to be the moment we usher in a new era of clean energy and a more resilient economy. You see, the president's bipartisan infrastructure law can be the bridge that gets us to the future, gets us there sooner, faster, and better. Today's plan is a set of more than 20 actions, not only from the federal government, but from our partners as well. The Federal Highway Administration will expand its highly successful Everyday Counts program to include all types of service transportation, including highways, rail, and transit. This will give us a successful model to scale and will help our partners save both time and money by using the most innovative practices for planning, contracting, and more. The Department of Commerce and Interior's Bureau of Indian Affairs are teaming up to improve environmental permitting for more rapid delivery of high-speed internet projects on tribal lands. The U.S. Department of Transportation will launch a Project Delivery Center of Excellence at the Volpe Center in Massachusetts to support and educate transportation infrastructure project managers at state and local level on project design, project planning, and construction. It will serve as a central resource for the most innovative and effective practices and bring project managers together to learn from one another. The U.S. Corps of Engineers Civil Works program is using alternative delivery approaches and innovative contract mechanisms to accelerate the delivery of water projects, which will result in significant cost savings through the faster project timelines. And there's more. The Department of Commerce will initiate a Dig Once effort in cooperation with the Departments of Transportation and Energy. Dig Once entails interagency coordination on planning, design, and construction to prevent multiple excavations for broadband, transportation, and electrification projects. The Eno Center for Transportation is conducting a study that's focused on upskilling public sector project managers, the people on the ground overseeing these complicated infrastructure projects. The National Governors Association and AASHTO are working directly with the states to identify and spread best practices. And of course, states, tribes, local and territorial governments are innovating and finding creative solutions every day, and we want to continue supporting those great efforts. These are just a few of the actions we'll be speaking about more today. With these first steps, I am confident that we are on the right path. There is no time to waste. Mothers like Deanna Branch in Milwaukee are waiting on us to replace lead pipes so her kids like Jaden and Aiden are not poisoned. Seniors like Katrina Petway in Atlanta are hoping for high-speed internet so her grandkids can participate in school. Business owners like Jesus Ramirez Fajardo, who I met in East Las Vegas, recently needs a road redesign to help make commerce easier and for safer walks to and from school for the kids in nearby. And employees like Sean Diamante, a third-generation railroader at Amtrak, sees our investments as a chance to build generational wealth for his family. We talk a lot about dollar figures and federal funding, but these are the names, these are the faces of the people all of us and all of this work impacts. This is why what we're doing to accelerate our progress, to build a faster, to build a stronger, to build a better way is so important. So let me close with this. After decades of waiting, the bipartisan infrastructure law is finally here. Thanks to President Biden and Vice President Harris, our infrastructure decade has finally arrived. Almost 1 year in, we have made a lot of progress, but we have a very long way to go. Together, in communities big and small, we will prove that we can do big things again and build a better America for us all. With that, rebuilding our infrastructure is a bipartisan effort. So let me now turn to Governor Eric Holcomb, the governor of the great state of Indiana and a real partner in this effort. Governor, welcome, and thank you all.
As the state that's known globally as the crossroads of America, Indiana's transportation infrastructure couldn't be more crucial to our momentum and to our nation's future. And the connections we're building mile after mile are only possible because of the partnerships we share with our state, local, and federal teammates. A few months ago, we were proud to host federal officials as we began construction on one of the largest public transit investments in Hoosier history. As Secretary Buttigieg is intimately aware from his time as Mayor Pete, double tracking the South Shore line and building the Westlake Corridor in Northwest Indiana are only made possible because of the vision, funding, and again, teamwork of multiple administrations spanning the state, federal, and local levels of government. These are just a few examples of the multitude of ways we're working together with you on projects when the construction cones go up and the asphalt or rail goes down. Opportunity is sure to follow. Because from our highways to our railways, from our multiple water ports and airports, we're executing a plan that's in place to maintain and build upon Indiana's #1 ranked infrastructure program, reliant again on local, state, and federal funding streams that are propelling us all forward like a winning Indy car. So, we couldn't be more grateful for your collaboration on improving and enhancing the infrastructure that connects our states and communities to even greater opportunity today and for years and decades to come. Thanks so much.
Governor, thank you so very much. And of course, all of you here is possible without great work from staff. So I want to thank Louisa Pawanski, Narain Khan, Sam Silverberg, Asma Mirza for the incredible work and the work that all of you have done to help put this together. And thank you all for traveling here today. And thank our guests who are watching. All right, it's time to get started. I want to introduce my dear friend and partner in this effort, whose team has just been doing an unbelievable job. Please help me welcome Secretary Pete Buttigieg, Secretary of Transportation, who's going to lead this discussion on the on-time part of making things go faster and better. Secretary Pete. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Good morning, and thank you very much, first of all, to Mayor Landrieu for your leadership. As you might imagine, I am convinced that it is always a good idea to put a mayor in charge of something important, and his work and his team's work has been phenomenal in helping us to make the potential of the bipartisan infrastructure law into a reality across the many agencies that are involved, including the Department of Transportation. I want to recognize the leadership and vision of President Biden and Vice President Harris, along with the leaders in Congress who made this legislation possible. After years and even decades of talk, it has finally actually happened. And I want to thank Mayor Hancock, Secretary Wilson, and ASC President-elect Maria Lehman, who are going to join us on this panel in a moment for their time. Our goal every day as we get up in the morning at the Department of Transportation is to deliver good projects well. And a very important part of that is making sure that they are done on time, which will be the focus of our first discussion. Now, the truth is that builders of infrastructure projects dating back to antiquity have not always been good at that, especially when the projects are big and ambitious. There's an entire academic literature about the many ways and places where big projects have taken too long, but there are also shining examples of what it is like to get it right. And so today is about sharing lessons and new resources to help replicate and spread examples of success. President Biden has been very clear that he wants infrastructure to be delivered more quickly and efficiently than in the past, and importantly, to serve everyone in this country. So this is about hitting timelines without cutting corners. Building good projects well means addressing safety and environmental justice and community needs on the front end and reflecting our strong values and commitments around labor protections and around keeping it made in America. 90% of projects under this infrastructure package will be built by state, tribal, and local government, and we recognize that as federal partners. We also recognize that our role as a federal partner is to help make sure that those project sponsors succeed. And we're taking several steps toward that goal. First, we're investing significant resources to help federal and project partners overcome 3 consistent roadblocks to getting things done on time: a lack of data, lack of technology, and need for greater capacity. And just as one example, we're very proud that US DOT will be launching the Project Delivery Center of Excellence, hosted at the Volpe Center, to help recipients of federal funding deliver their projects more effectively. Secondly, we still sometimes hear the idea out there that community engagement is responsible for slowing projects down. But our experience shows that the reverse can be true, that early community engagement, when it is done early and often and in a thorough and inclusive fashion, actually helps to meet a project timeline. I just saw a great example of that for myself in Detroit, where we were announcing a $100 million federal grant to help transform the I-375 freeway. The state and the city developed the project with such rich and thorough community input that we were able to avoid layers of review that might otherwise have been necessary and get through NEPA more quickly. And today, our Departmental Office of Civil Rights is releasing a guide with best practices on community engagement to help more project sponsors do the same. And third, we are launching the newest iteration of Federal Highway's successful Everyday Counts program. It's something that has spurred successful federal state innovation on project delivery and expanding it from highways to also multimodal and transit and rail efforts as well. Modernizing our infrastructure is a national undertaking pursuant to the President's nationwide vision, but it's going to happen one project at a time. It's a generational opportunity that we are going to make the most of together, but that will absolutely require engagement with everyone represented at this convening. And if we get it right, when we get it right, we will be building a foundation for empowerment and prosperity for generations of Americans. And so much of that depends on building on time, on task, on budget, which, as we do that, will also help us to rebuild trust in this country. So now to introduce our terrific panel. First of all, Michael Hancock, a great friend and mayor of Denver who has a number of successful examples to share from his experience in Colorado. Please welcome Mayor Hancock. Dr. Sean Wilson, Secretary of Transportation for the state of Louisiana and President of the American Association of State and Highway Transportation Officials, AASHTO. Welcome, Dr. Wilson. And Maria Lehman, professional engineer and president-elect of the American Society of Civil Engineers. Thank you for joining us, Maria. So, let's proceed with the first round of lessons learned. That's where I'd like to begin. Mayor, I'll start with you. I wonder if you can share from on the ground some of the experiences you've had, especially if there might be a project or an effort you could point to in Denver, sure, which you were able to get done against these headwinds that pull things into taking too long, what it took and what we could learn from that.
Well, first of all, glad to be here with you. I want to thank our friend Mitch Landrieu as well for inviting us. I'll do you better. I'm going to do two projects that one of them came to mind as Mitch mentioned or talked about lead pipes in Milwaukee. Yeah, our Denver Water Department started about 3 years ago replacing all the lead pipes, particularly primarily in our older neighborhoods throughout Denver. It was going to take over a decade to complete this project. And once the infrastructure bill was passed, basically we were able to cut the replacement of those lead pipes, accelerate the project, and cut it, the timeline, almost in half. Because of the additional resources, the ability to subcontract out more of those resources. And we got to remember that most of the older neighborhoods in most of our major cities are where many, if not most of our most vulnerable residents live. And so replacing these lead pipes is critically important, a critically important project that we're doing throughout the city of Denver. Another project that you're very familiar with is the Central I-70 project in Denver, where we are doing a cap and sliver project, taking the highway that was built and divided you know the story, an environmental injustice project. It divided a primarily minority community, low-income community, and just devastated the community over 5 decades ago. We were lowering the highway, and we were capping it, at least partially, with a park. But there were still some side roads throughout the area that needed to be connected. And with the design and engagement of the community, we were running short on these dollars. We were prepared to invest $23 million. We were not going to achieve the vision laid out by the community. And when the infrastructure bill was passed, we were able to not only accelerate the project, but build the project to the standards and in accordance with the vision that the community laid out for us. These side roads, about 5 blocks, help kids get to school more safely. These kids were basically taking their lives in their own hand, going across railroad tracks, trying to get to school on time. It really divided the community, continued to divide the community, and it hurt a lot of our small businesses that were in the community. So being able to complete this project, about 5 blocks, repavement, as well as the other supplementary things that the community laid out, was critical, and this bill helped us to do this. So not only are we accelerating projects, but we are doing it under the guides and values of the Justice 40 project, going into these vulnerable communities and making things happen quickly.
Terrific. Let's talk a little more about how that imperative to move quickly meets your commitment that's also our administration's commitment on things like equity and sustainability. Because I do think in the public dialogue, sometimes those values get pitted against each other. What have you seen works best in terms of ensuring that equity and sustainability are incorporated in a project vision in a way that can help not hurt the on-time delivery? I'm
glad you asked that question, Mr. Secretary. The values of equity being embedded in its effort is, quite frankly, it's non-negotiable. We will never see, or probably in our lifetimes, this level of investment in infrastructure again. And so we get a chance to finally stop talking about equity and leveling up our communities that are underserved and perennially underrepresented at times, underinvested in, as well as lifting up our women and minority businesses. If we can't do it with this project and with these dollars, then we're never going to do it. And shame on us if we turn the lights out on this era and we have not made the unprecedented investment to lift up communities and create the ladders of opportunity with investment in small and women-owned and minority-owned businesses, then shame on us. And so we should not miss this opportunity. So how we do it, we know as cities and state governments and as tribal governments, we are used to putting out RFP for these projects. We know how to do this stuff. We still have bureaucracy issues, but we know how to do them. I mean, we do it almost with memory. In our sleep, we do them because we do them every day. The added layer, equity and value, as a value. And we have to hold ourselves as well as the small businesses accountable. We can do this on task, on time, and on budget. But you got to bring the mindset, private sector, public sector, to the table that we're going to do this. It's going to be inclusive of everyone. So as a leader of these institutions, the mayor of the city, has to make it very clear. This is not going to be business as usual. If you don't come to the table with a mindset and an inclusive, equity mindset, then you're not going to be a part of doing business here. I mean, the reality is this is what we're going to use as a benchmark, not as an added value, but as a benchmark in terms of how we're going to do business, particularly with these dollars. And hopefully we can change the trajectory, change the opportunities from these underserved and disadvantaged communities. I think it's imperative, it's non-negotiable, and we can advance the projects on task, on time, and on budget with the same value.
Well, I think when local leaders set that tone,
Absolutely.
Civil society and the private sector can follow.
Absolutely.
Great that you're doing that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Dr. Wilson, you lead the Louisiana Department of Transportation and Development, and have, I'm sure, examples both of the challenges that make it hard to get things done on time and hopefully some success stories. I know some success stories about how you got it done. What do you think it takes, and what do you think the community of leaders, especially knowing that for every dollar we're actually procuring or managing at the federal level, many, many, many more are ultimately being directed by you and your state colleagues?
So, great question, and thank you for having me. You know, having been a mayor, you understand the urgency of getting things done, and I guess a good example for us was when Mayor Landrieu was there. He built this amazing airport, and the state was lagging in having access, and so we've been able to jump in on a project that had no environmental clearance, no traffic, no funding, no design, nothing there. As a secretary, I saw the imperative of making that happen, and we created what's called an Office of Innovative Delivery, which gives us an opportunity to, in a sense, take all of the rules, set them aside, play by the rules, but still look at how do you, in a very innovative way, work through those. And it's really having a horizontal and a vertical relationship with decision makers from the federal level, the local level, and of course in the state. And as a secretary, when you have an entire state, you don't have the ability to focus in on 300 to 400 projects to the same level of intensity. So this Office of Innovative Procurement allowed me to take maybe 6 or 7 of the projects that are going to be worth about 90% of the public perception of our department. Some of the greatest value offered to the community will be those 90% projects, those 5 or 6. And we were able to target those because the vast majority of our projects were humming along pretty well. It's the big transformative projects, the ones that will create wealth, that will create a transformed community. And I found that working together across those boundaries, recognizing that those boundaries are artificial dividers, that they're not real dividers, that we can work together and have priorities that are aligned, makes a big difference. And so from my perspective, I love seeing those projects go out on time. I love having the accountability of working with the mayor to say, well, you're going to just have to get it done because we did our part, you do yours. And we've done that. And so it also takes transforming our construction industry. It takes transforming our engineering sector. And that's where innovative delivery allows us to extract value. And that value is directly related to time, money, and being on task. Because if we miss the mark on any of those three, we find ourselves being set back. And we lose public trust, you lose public confidence. And you can't forget that if we don't get it done, the problem that we were trying to fix will persist anyway, and it's only going to get worse. And that's one of those really big challenges for states and locals, is to make sure we fix it and fix it right the first time, and not get sucked into, oh, this is the way we've done it, and we're always going to do it that way.
So with that in mind, let me now have you switch hats from your Louisiana leadership to your national leadership of AASHTO. What do you think is most important for states to exchange the best practices, to cross-pollinate the best ideas, to help each other, and to seek the right kind of help that we can provide at the federal level, as you've now had a chance to engage with and lead your peers across the country with very different states and territories, but in some cases, very similar headwinds?
So, the fabric of AASHTO is one of sharing best practices and ideas. It was really created to bring what was happening in the West and the East, the North or the South or the central part of our country, and say, here's how we're doing it. And so between our publications, our technical assistance, our communities of practice, our centers of excellence, much like what we're seeing with the U.S. Department of Transportation, when you look at our ROFs and our ability to deal with operational excellence in a way that we can spend time with the Pacific Territories and Hawaii and talk about, here's how you manage some of these issues. And there, while at that ROF, it's a partnership between USDOT and AASHTO. We learned this new phrase of R&D. It was rip off and duplicate. And so AASHTO is really about sharing. I can't take credit for it.
I like that.
AASHTO is really big on sharing and understanding those best practices. And I can give you a good example. NEPA assignment, for example. California is one of the first states to work with the federal government to assume some responsibility for NEPA on certain projects. It has allowed them to reduce the time to delivery significantly compared to what we were doing before. The relationships that I have with my Federal Highway Administration, Wes Bollinger, we meet on a monthly basis, and we work through issues on the front end where we say, here's a priority. This is something I need you to help us get to. And so we take that same example at AASHTO and we replicate it from technology. When you look at e-construction, when you look at project management and program delivery, those best practices, those nuances, those examples of what Utah might be doing or what Colorado is doing absolutely makes sense. And not only that, when you deal with local governments and what we see with MPOs and rural communities, we can take some of those best practices and apply in our state as well. And that's one of the hallmarks, I think, of AASHTO. And then finishing up on the comment that you and the mayor just spoke about in terms of equity, the idea that U.S. DOT has prioritized these issues, that this administration has prioritized those issues, AASHTO itself has, in my tenure, and I believe going forward, will create ways to deal with introducing equity and creating ways to partner such that we can sustain these concepts and then change the fabric of how we work, how we do the work. And you, in your opening remarks, you talked about Public outreach and engagement. That's another good example of where we can take the best and the brightest ideas of using technology, using outreach approaches to really duplicate that and ensure that the entire country reaps the benefits of what some states are really excelling at and others might need some help.
Yes.
EVs the same way. Those rollouts, some states are maybe much farther ahead than others. We can now replicate that, rip off and duplicate that to deliver for our states and for our country.
Very good. I'm going to remember that. R&D.
R&D. R&D.
So Dr. Wilson mentioned the transformations that need to happen in the private sector too, and in the engineering space. So let me turn now, Maria Lehman, to you as you're preparing to take on leadership at ASCE. Of course, whenever engineers get organized, they give us those letter grades on the condition of our infrastructure.
And we're hoping for getting a high C next time.
we think these funds are going to help us make the grade, but that will require a lot of transformation and a lot of work to be on the absolute cutting edge. What do you see happening in the engineering space, and more generally maybe in the private sector and professional space, to partner with public sector project sponsors and get things done and get them done on time?
One of the things that I think you're seeing, and we heard Mitch talk about it, you talk about it, there's a lot of programs on Accelerate, the need for speed to be able to do some things. And so you don't need to think outside of the box. You need to forget about the box. You need to think about what really the core principles are and really the base building blocks that you need to do, and focus in on those. I mean, there's been discussion here about the community outreach. You have to do very robust community outreach up front, or you're going to get the people that are the haters and that don't want anything to happen. And so robust community involvement is really important, and that's a partnering. I worked on several projects where we went from a NEPA notice of intent to a record of decision, the Mario Cuomo Bridge being one of them, and the Peace Bridge in Western New York being another, in 13 months. It's doable. But you have to be out there with the public regularly. You also have to think about how you don't do things linearly. It can't be in series. You can't finish everything before you start the next process. We can be very environmentally responsible about what we're doing, provide equity, provide the social justice, but you have to do it at once, all at the same time, and that's not how we've delivered projects in the past. For the mega projects, you don't do them without that. On the smaller projects, having been in local government as well, it's very important to think systemically. So if you have to do that last mile, your community, and you have to do 2 or 3 last mile bridges, maybe you should put them together as a package so you don't have the administrative cost of doing 3 separately. Yeah. And so everything from the smallest projects to the largest projects, it's about thinking about doing things differently. And I tell people when you drive, you kind of glance in the rearview mirror to make sure. But you look forward, because if you keep looking at the way we've done things, you're going to have a crash.
Well said. Let me also ask about the theme that's come up a few times here, and something we think about a lot in our department, and this comes up often at the interagency table that Mayor Landrieu has set up, which is that we are testing the productive capacity of the United States with these investments. They're that ambitious, and there are that many of them. And that means we can't afford to leave any talent on the table. So what can be done to bring more people into the profession, including women, including professionals of color, whose talents our country is going to need just in order to deliver all of this, and knowing that it's the right thing to do to create opportunity for more people who could have fantastic careers in this infrastructure decade and infrastructure era that's opening up?
I've been in this business for 40 years, and I can't tell you how excited I am that we stopped talking about it and we're doing it, okay? I've been doing public policy and transportation for 30. I was one of like 300 and 400 engineers in my school, and so numbers are better, but there's still, if you look at people of color and women, we're less than half of what's represented in the population, and it really hasn't changed, and in a lot of cases, it's backsliding. And so we really have to double down on that. And I think there's a lot of workforce development here. I also think one of the things ASCE is going to be looking at is how we collect the best practices from around the country. USDOT used to have a very robust of a project over a certain size that you had a trainee. And that you invested money, you gave money to the manager that was half of the time and half of the time of the trainee to learn on the job. I just met this week, I was actually on a school board a couple decades back, and met with the head of curriculum that's doing STEM, applied STEM in K through 5. Because they said, what's a computer lab? I mean, you know, even a kindergartner knows more about your phone. I mean, I have grandchildren. They know more how to do it with my phone than I do. But, you know, using it applied and having a tinkering lab and using the computer as a tool. So I think there's a lot of best practices. We do a lot of, we did Dream Big and put it out in all the museums around the country. You can see it on Alaska Airlines. You can get it on Netflix about the possibility. Secretary Granholm talked about this being the Earth shot. I'm a child of the 60s. It was the moon shot that got everybody interested in technology and engineering. This is our time to use the tools we have. And we've launched a tool called Future World Vision, which will be at IMAX and all kinds of museums next year, about what things are going to look like 50 years from now. Now, are we going to get it right? Probably not. But we're creating creative problem solving, not just for the kids to see, but actually for communities of practice. Like, how do I get, you know, 100 drones at lunchtime to deliver lunch to this building that's going to be there in 50 years? And thinking more critically about what the challenges are that we have to solve. You know, the other thing too, I think some of the people leaving the profession, and women, 70% leave within 20 years, leave engineering within 20 years of graduating, and that's a deplorable number. And I think it's frustration. I think it's frustration with culture. I think it's frustration with process. So streamlining process, one of the things ASC's just launched is a campaign about our EJCDC documents, the Engineering Joint Council, which we do with the Professional Engineers Society and the American Council of Engineering Companies, on how do you streamline process for both regular delivery and alternative delivery, and we're going to be pushing that out. USDA does it right now. We're working with your office as far as getting more information out there. It's not as difficult, because you look at communities that are trying to use this money. Those of us who know it know it's difficult. Those who don't know it are just overwhelmed. So I think it's making it more responsive, easier, and you know, hit that easy button. This is a cool career.
Mr. Secretary, can I add to that? Because I think Ms. Lehman hits a point that I think is extremely important as part of this overall effort. In the 1990s and early turn of the century, one of the most phenomenal moments of my life was serving as CEO of an Urban League affiliate in Denver, Colorado. And at that point, you might recall, we had a 70,000 person deficit, or employee deficit, in the telecom industry. In the Urban League of Denver, we decided to partner with the private sector to train the next generation of telecom employees. People who are coming to install and repair your cable at your home, your Wi-Fi. These are the folks we train. We could do it in 4 weeks, and it made a phenomenal difference. It spread across the country. I think Ms. Lehman is absolutely right. I cannot underscore more how important it was for the President of the United States, Joe Biden, stand up and say Justice 40. Because not only did he talk about lifting up women and minority businesses and impacting communities of low income and marginalized communities in a way with these dollars that we've never done before, but he also talked about workforce development. And it's a critical moment. So in Denver, what we do is, if you are a bidder on these contracts, not only do we have equity embedded in the evaluative process, and this is how we don't slow it down, right? This is how you get the deal. You write it into the RFP. But apprenticeships are critically important as well for impactful communities. And so if you're a construction company, a road paving, building bridge, I don't care what you're doing, you are now required as part of our contract to do an apprenticeship program. And it must come from the impacted communities for the project. And so, yes, you see people who are just starting their careers on these sites, and they'll walk up to you and say, matter of fact, we just honored one who said, I was unemployed before this project came, and now I'm a year into this project, and a couple years I'll be, even advancing further along in construction. This will make a difference. That's how we're going to create the next generation of employees in construction and in road engineering work and other industries, even replace these lead pipes. We're doing the same thing with the Water Department. That is you now have the skill set to mark yourself for a lifetime. And that will make a difference in our economy, but also in the lives of these young people.
It's one of the most exciting things about this season of infrastructure,
Absolutely.
I think, is that we're not just building bridges and pipes and roads and airports. We're building lives and livelihoods. We're
Absolutely.
building careers, we're building people up, and you see the pride that people talk with when they share how
Absolutely.
their apprenticeship journey has brought them to this point. We're
Yeah.
eager to see a lot more of that.
Absolutely.
We've been hearing a lot about, I think, innovation, inclusion, ways to get things right on the ground. I'd love to hear a little more, Dr. Wilson, from you on what it looks like for the federal government to be the best possible partner to the project sponsors who are out there on the ground getting this done. The states, the mayors, the tribes, the transit agencies, but of course in particular you have the perspective in the states. How can we best line up and team up so that we can hit our respective marks?
Well, I mean, you mentioned it and you just nailed it, that it's what's happening on the ground. And these best practices that I'll mention apply not just to US DOT, but also to states toward local governments in terms of saying, let's understand what the real need is and what the owner is and help build capacity in those local governments and help build capacity at the state level to be able to share those experiences and resources. We've done projects historically, programmatically for quite some time, and with this new infrastructure law, what's happening today is needing to build capacity to build a pipeline of projects to be able to leverage that future workforce. And so what I would tell you from the federal level is understand that, you know, no state is created equal. I mean, while we have some equal benefits and responsibilities, we all are at different levels, and understand the restrictions that might be placed from the legislature or from a local government. And Deputy Secretary Trottenberg and I had coffee early in the week, and we talked about constitutional limitations that I might have in Louisiana and how can I deliver differently than perhaps what another state might do. So understanding that no two states are exactly alike in terms of those authorities. The second thing I think is doing what many states already do, is build a relationship to work through and resolve differences, whether it's understanding what policies are, because it seems like there's always these policies at the federal level and we never get rid of any, and you just add to it and you have to moderate it. And so that comes with a relationship. And so I can give you examples of where we shared risk. And that risk involved Stephanie Pollock and I having conversations about how to deal with that risk in an innovative delivery project if it went too long to get federal approval. Those types of shared responsibilities absolutely make sense. And then the third thing, I think, and you're doing a great job at it, is making funds available to really deliver in a way that states can achieve what's on their mission tables for them. And so all of the resources that we see, from broadband to resilience to asset management, which is huge for us, the idea of safety being something that's universal across this country, and you've been an amazing champion to focus on the issue of safety, helping us get the tools necessary to deliver what's important on the ground, I think is really the best place for the federal government to be. You all enable us, you fund us, you help us, but we both can equally lead on some of these issues and have best practices. Roger Millar, who's on the panel a little bit later, will talk about how in their state, a smaller portion of their budget is from the federal government, so they can be a lot more aggressive. That's not for everybody. And so understanding those dynamics are super, super important, and maintaining that open communication. And I think we get that exceptionally well from the federal government right now.
And we are committed to maintaining that. I think we recognize that we need to not only provide resources for bricks and mortar, but resources to support that community engagement, to support that capacity building, to support that data gathering that we know we need to help each other get done in order to keep things on time.
Resolving differences. You know, the idea of looking at a national network of what I call diverse business enterprises to ease the process. Those are the things that make it a lot easier for us to go out and do great things, is when you give us the tools to say, I can find a company here, I can do that, I can cross this artificial boundary of a state line for a company that's going to build my bridge, that's going to build their state's bridge. Those are the things I think that make absolute sense. And we see that at the local level as well. I mean, they can be much more aggressive in some cases than we can. We can be more aggressive than perhaps the feds can on occasion. But that makes a big difference.
The theme of our panel is on time, and I want to make sure we stay on time, so I'm going to come to you, Ms. Lehman, for the last word. It sounded like you had a thought on what Dr. Wilson was saying.
You know, adding to what Dr. Wilson said, I think you also have to look at the private sector. Because at the state level, you have resources, and we're all resource constrained right now. I mean, that's the bottom line. And then you get into bigger cities, and that you have the resources. But when you start getting into smaller cities in rural America, the private sector really has to do that partnering and that sharing and bringing those best ideas to be able to get work done. And go through that maze, because even if you put guidelines out there, some people have never taken one penny of federal money, and they just don't understand how complicated it can be. So I think what we're looking at is all the places that within ASCE, because we're a third academicians, a third consultants, and a third government engineers, and we have to, all those groups have to agree for us to put a policy or procedure out there or a standard. So it's looking at how do you simplify, because like you said, one size fits none. And so there's always that little, wrinkle that you have to work through, and the private sector, especially small rurals, and quite frankly, a lot of the private money that's going, in the new energy area. You've got utilities that are private utilities that, have spent their entire lifetime fighting with government. And so getting them to understand how to be able to leverage and have the relationship is something that the consulting community is doing a very big job at.
And amen to what you were saying about navigating those federal processes, having been the mayor of a small to mid-sized city, depending how you looked at us, knocking on the door of those federal buildings. It really does take a lot of partnership in order to navigate that. Sometimes that comes from the academic or the private sector, not just from the government side.
And states want to help local governments achieve that the right way. We want the policy you have around funding bridges that aren't mine. Is huge. We just announced over $300 million as a result of the infrastructure law to fund locally owned bridges. And we're going to come in and do the heavy lifting, but we're going to listen to them and take their priorities. And so that's an example of how states can help locals on a number of projects with the private sector, with our state experience on the federal bureaucracy. And so we welcome those types of policies.
Well, that's a great reminder that whether you put a nameplate on it like our Center of Excellence that we're setting up at Volpe or not, there are centers of excellence and expertise for this in the state agencies, in communities, in the private sector, and we need to engage all of them. Last thought, Mayor?
Well, I'm just going to say, I don't think there's anything more important than the relationship between the state and local governments or tribal governments, because it helps the fluidity and the ease in which we're able to move projects forward, or it can be an impediment, right? It can be a huge impediment. So this relationship between state and local governments is critically important.
Well, thank you again for these insights. One value we talk a lot about at USDOT is that of imagination, and I heard that in each of your responses, both in terms of what you've done successfully and what we're going to be doing on the road ahead. So as the conversation turns to the small matter of keeping everything on budget and everything on task, thank you for these insights on how to keep everything on time, and please join me in thanking our panel today.
Secretary, thank you so much. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Sean. Maria, thank you so much for all your great comments. I love that. Let's do everything. Don't do it one time. Do it all together.